Thank you.
Durme, durme, hermosa.
My name is Tanya Titus. I am an undocumented immigrant and one of Motus monologists in the Undocu America Project and Motus Theater's National Outreach and Education Director. Today's performance is about sanctuary. Sanctuary is defined as a place of refuge or safety. For example, right now, because of the pandemic, people across our country are taking refuge in our homes, a kind of self-imprisonment to keep ourselves safe and to prevent the spread of the virus to the most vulnerable. Those in sanctuary whose story you will hear today sought refuge in churches and synagogues from another threat, that of being separated from their families. Immigrants seek sanctuary not only to protect ourselves, but to speak out for 11 million undocumented immigrants who are living, working, and paying taxes in this country. As a DACA recipient myself, this topic hits close to home for me since I never know when my own family, my undocumented parents, might be forced to take sanctuary. This performance was scripted by Motus Theater's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson, based on interviews and photos that award-winning photojournalist Joel Dyer did with Rosa Sabido, Ingrid Encalada La Torre, Sandra Lopez, and Araceli Velasquez. Usually in Motus performances, Motus monologists read their own stories. But today, they will be read by 4 women from Bonai Shalom: Anna Hanson, Jessica Hersh, Rabbi Rosalie Osian, and Charna Rosenholtz. After the reading, there will be a conversation with all of the readers and Rabbi Mark Soloway, and a moment for all of you attending to ask questions as well. We will ask each reader now to say your own name and then read the short description of the person whose story you are reading today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charna Rosenholtz, and I am a Hebrew wisdom educator here in Boulder, Colorado. I am honored to be reading the story of Araceli Velasquez, who has lived in the United States since 2010. She is married with 4 children who are American citizens. She moved into sanctuary at Park Hill United Methodist Church in Temple Micah in Denver, Colorado on August 8th, 2017.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Hanson. I'm honored to be reading the story of Ingrid Encalada La Torre, who has lived in the United States since she was a teenager. She is married with 3 children who are American citizens. She has been in sanctuary at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder.
My name is Rosalie Osian, and I am privileged and honored to be reading the story of Rosa, who is in sanctuary now for over a year. Rosa is a pillar of her community, helps many people in her community. She is a translator. She is a volunteer. She is a worker. She loves nature. She is a caregiver. She is a person with many dreams. And I'm grateful to be reading her. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Hersh, and I'm honored that I'll be reading the story of Sandra Lopez, who originally came from Mexico in 1998. She is married with 3 children who are American citizens. She entered sanctuary on October 19, 2017, in the small basement of the Two Rivers Unitarian Universalist Church parsonage in Carbondale, Colorado.
Thank you so much to all of the readers for modeling courageous empathy and civic hospitality. In a moment, Rabbi Soloway will say a few words to open our hearts and minds to the stories we're about to hear. And after that, Teresita Lozano, whose family is part of the crypto-Jewish legacy in Mexico, will sing a lullaby in the Judeo-Spanish language called Ladino. The translation is, "My beautiful girl, sleep, sleep, without anxiety and pain, sleep. My beautiful boy, sleep, sleep, without anxiety and pain, sleep." This is a challenging time for everyone across our country. So I do hope that every time Teresita sings, you will feel she is truly singing to you personally. So you can breathe, cry if you need to, and settle into your big, strong, tender hearts. This way we can all leave this performance restored for the good work ahead. And now, Rabbi Soloway, do you have any opening words for us?
Thank you so much. I feel so honored to be a part of this amazing evening we're going to have together. And just to reflect, we're in the Hebrew month, the last days of the Hebrew month of Elul, which is the month that leads us into the Jewish New Year. And it's a month of introspection. It's a month of intimacy. It's a month of going inside, but also remembering our obligations on the outside. And it's a month of very deep listening. And one of the ways in which we are helped to listen is the very powerful ritual of blowing the shofar every day throughout the month of Elul. And what the rabbis tell us is that this is not a passive act. We can't hear just with our ears. We have to listen with our full beings, with our hearts, with every cell in our body. We have to intend to absorb this sound. And so I'm going to do a little blast on the shofar, and with the sound of the shofar, and one of the sounds of the shofar is called shavarim, which is really about brokenness and about tears. And specifically the rabbis talk about women's tears as being the sound of this shofar. And the invitation is to allow the shofar to drop us in to deep, attentive listening. We're not just listening to stories with our minds. We're listening to stories of real human beings with our whole beings.
Dorme, hermosa doncella, dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor, dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Dorme, dorme, hermoso Egipto. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor.
I had 5 days to make the decision whether to go into sanctuary. My lawyer called me up and said, if you go to your immigration check-in, you will probably be put in detention and then deported. I've lived in this country, in the same little blue house next to my parents for over 32 years, and I've contributed to this country. I've worked 20-hour days, 6 days a week. I have my food business. I'm the secretary of the local Catholic churches. I'm the person everyone relies on to translate documents. And of course, I'm the main support for my aging parents who are citizens. And they were going to put me into detention which is like being sent to jail, and then deport me? It's ridiculous. They somehow expected me to pick up and leave an entire life in just 5 days. Leave my home, my dogs. I love my old dogs. I love my house, the sunsets over Ute Mountain. I have stopped to watch every sunset I could over Sleeping Ute Mountain for over 32 years. And they were going to deport me after all this time. So just a few days before my immigration appointment, we scheduled a conference between myself, my lawyer, and the Methodist pastor in the nearby town of Mancos. His church had just decided to be part of the sanctuary movement. He knew who I was. He had eaten my tamales. I knew his church. It was the beautiful little church in the garden. I remember the pastor asked me where I wanted to stay in the church. I just said, well, anywhere, you know. I could be in the kitchen. Just give me a corner. I don't mind. I just can't leave. I am not only the economic support for my aging parents. I'm the one who translates for them and takes care of things, from their mail to their doctor's appointments. My mother just went to the doctor while visiting my brother in Mexico. They discovered she has breast cancer. I can't take care of her in the church, and I'm afraid she will die in Mexico without me. But if I leave sanctuary, I'm just giving up. And I'm not in sanctuary just for me and my family. My position here allows me to raise awareness about what is happening to immigrants in our small communities across this nation. I know that sometimes our voices are heard simply by the sacrifices we make. But I miss my mom.
Until last night, I truly believed I had made peace with the difficult decision to be deported to Peru, taking my 2 sons with me and splitting our family. I was too tired to keep fighting and face the long-term prospects of living in sanctuary. But then, the reality started to hit. Brian, my older son in 4th grade, was crying and begging me not to force him to leave our home and his school. You see, it's not just me, like it was when I came to the US as a teenager. Now there are my 2 children who are both US citizens, and thinking about taking them back there, away from their country. I didn't finish my degree. I don't have a profession or a way to start from zero after 20 years. And there's not really anything more than sustenance I could provide them. My aunt, who recently returned from Peru, shared with me the devastating poverty the country is facing in the aftermath of Venezuela's economic crisis. And, well, it may seem like a small thing to you, but Anibal, my 2-year-old son, has a bad cold and there's no health clinic where my family lives in Peru. No place to take him if he needs a doctor. No, I decided I must choose sanctuary and do what's best for my children.
In 2017, after many years of being granted a stay of deportation, my lawyer said that my stay was denied. I was supposed to report to immigration the very next day. I remember that night was incredibly difficult. People who love and support me were calling, but I couldn't talk. I just needed some time alone to think and to make sure that I wasn't making a mistake. I tried to sleep, but my eyes were wide open. I didn't want the day to come. At 6 a.m., I got up and woke my son Edwin for middle school. And that was the last day I got him ready for school from our home. I didn't want him to see how upset I was, and I couldn't tell him what was about to happen. I had to turn my back so he didn't see me crying. I gave him a huge hug as he headed out the door, and I told him that I loved him very much. After he left, I started putting things into a suitcase for me and my 2-year-old daughter, and then I went to inform my employer. I didn't know how to tell them. I just said, I'm not going to be able to come back. I'm not going to be able to come into work for a while. And they were confused and asked, why? You're such a good worker. You always seem happy here. All I could do was say yes. I have a huge emergency. I don't want to leave my job, but I don't know how long it's going to be. It really hurt going into sanctuary. I left behind not only my job, but my town, my home, my role as a parent, my role as a wife, and I did it so I would not be separated from my children.
I thank God every day that I'm in sanctuary with these two faith communities. Park Hill Methodist and Temple Micah both stand with me. I feel that I'm not alone, and I can fight my case from here and work to change these unjust laws. There is so much racism, so much evil that is happening. Because when you separate a mother from her child or a father, I think that is a grand evil, and you are causing deep harm to families. The women who are in sanctuary belong in this country. Our children belong in this country. This government should recognize the right of our children to have their mothers and fathers with them. The nightmare that I fear every day is that ICE comes into this sanctuary and detains me in front of my children. And if Immigration and Customs Enforcement takes me, I would have to go back to El Salvador, where death is waiting for me. That's the nightmare that I have every day.
I pray before I go to sleep. I pray when I wake up. I don't leave this room without my prayer. And I always ask God for protection and guidance, and to not let me lose hope, and to help me to be kind with my words and with my deeds, and to support me with the purpose God has for me, to help me to do it right. And of course, I pray for my mom.
I first came to the United States with my husband 21 years ago. We were young and had so many dreams. We wanted to live somewhere we could buy a house someday and have a safe home for our children. It took us 2 days to cross the desert. We had no water. We had no food. I'll never forget the cacti. They would just rip up your shoes every step. And some people didn't even have shoes. But we eventually made it to Colorado near my husband's cousins. My husband got a job in construction, and I found work cleaning houses and hotels. We had our first boy, Alex, who is now 19, and then Edwin, who is 14, and I have my daughter, Aurelie, who is 2. We are honest, hardworking people with dreams of getting ahead, and now our American children have dreams of their own. I was helping my son Alex go to college, but unfortunately, now that I'm in sanctuary, I can no longer help him pay for tuition, and he had to drop out. And my younger son, Edwin, is so smart, but now he's afraid. He can't focus at school. He doesn't eat well. He stays awake throughout the night, worrying about what will happen. But Colorado is our life. My husband will never go back. 3 months ago, his cousin, who is a US resident, went back to Mexico for a vacation with his wife. He was buying a tractor for his family, and they were both murdered by a group of criminals while working by the tractor. Why did they kill them? They didn't have any reason, and his family has kids. My husband said, "No, I don't want to go to Mexico."
I came here from Peru when I was 17 years old to live with my aunt. I came for the American dream, a better life and the chance of education. I felt I had to buy a social security number to get work and raise money for college. I didn't want to depend on my aunt or the government or anybody else. I was young and healthy. I had hands and feet to support myself, and then later, my son. But now, when some people hear my story, they say I'm a thief because I stole a Social Security number. And yes, I did purchase that number on the street so I could get a job washing dishes at the nursing home. But I didn't know it belonged to someone. I thought it was fake. And yet, I paid for that mistake with jail time, with fees, over $11,000 to the court system, and money to the IRS. I was in jail for months and separated from my 2-year-old son. I more than paid for the impact, and my son paid for it too. But now I'm facing this double jeopardy because I'm also expected to pay for that mistake with deportation. But please understand, the need to bend rules in order to survive. The system creates that. We don't create it. And under this system, for many people, I am now a criminal.
I made the difficult decision to come to the United States when I was 19. I never imagined I would come to the US. I'm the youngest of all my siblings, so I thought my role would be to stay and care for my parents always. But the violence in El Salvador became unbearable. I thought crossing the US border was the only way I could save my life. The journey was terrible. I was afraid and so hungry. I went a whole week without eating any food, just water. I was trying to make it across 2 countries that I'd never been in, and I didn't know if I was going to survive. But I feel grateful to God because there were good people all along the way who helped me, and because there were more good people crossing my path than harmful people. I made it to the US border. There was one man, young, I'll never forget. I was in a bad situation, the only woman in a group of men preparing to cross the border. We were in the middle of nowhere, in some old abandoned barn. A few men wanted to abuse me. But this young man stepped in pretending he was my boyfriend. I've always felt that he was like God personified in that moment because he had no reason to help me. We didn't know each other, but he stood up for me and protected me. When we crossed the border, we were caught and separated. But I felt at that moment that God was saying to me, you're going to be safe now. I've protected you to this moment, and it's going to be okay. I've never been able to find him again, and I've tried many ways. I would so love to thank him and tell him what that meant to me. After all I had been through, to have this stranger, this man I didn't know, stand up and protect me.
If I let myself get deported, I could be with my mom and she continues with her cancer treatment. But if I do, I'll soon be the one needing help. You see, it's been so long since I left Mexico that I don't know how to survive. In Mexico, there is an age, and once you pass that age, you're not hired for any job, good or bad. I'm not a young person. How could I start over? It's not like I left yesterday. It has been 32 years. I just wish I had the freedom to go back and forth. A lot of people have that freedom. Why was it not created for me? Why not for me? It used to be that way years ago. We could work hard, earn what we got, and then go back home to Mexico. It was really simple. They made it complicated. Why? My 2 nephews, Daniel and Alejandro, graduated from our local high school. They both got deported, which is hard because Daniel has a son who was born in the US, and Daniel hasn't seen his own son in 10 years. Even after 10 years of living in Mexico, it's very hard for Daniel and Alejandro because they grew up in America. They're American. Now Daniel works in Mexico for Nordstrom customer service. So that's very convenient because they don't want us here where they would have to pay us $15 to $20 an hour. But they have these offices in other countries. And in Mexico, he doesn't get paid more than $100 a week, working 12-hour days, doing the same thing that others do here. Are we really taking someone else's jobs?
I fell into deportation because of a show me your papers law that required law enforcement to report anyone they thought might be undocumented to ICE. You see, in 2010, my husband and I had an argument that any couple might have. Our children were listening in the bedroom, and one of the kids called 911 and hung up. Parents fighting can be scary. And in elementary school, he was taught to call 911 if he needed help. So he was just doing what he had been taught. My husband and I had already finished our argument when the police showed up. The officer started asking my husband's questions about why 911 was called. The officer was getting frustrated because my husband was refusing to answer any questions. I told the officer that we had a simple argument and that we resolved it ourselves. But the police officer said, no, this must be domestic violence. Then, seeing that I wasn't going to accuse my husband of violence, and my husband wasn't accusing me, the officer asked for a state ID. And of course, I didn't have one. And that's when his behavior changed. He started yelling and said he was arresting me. My husband kept pleading, no, arrest me. Don't take my wife. Take me instead. But the officer took me out of my home in handcuffs. And by midnight at the jail, I had received a call from ICE. My husband was furious that they could arrest me under false charges and tried to get me out. He eventually was able to meet with the district attorney and explain the situation. So after 2 weeks in jail, I went to court and the charges were officially dropped. The judge said, "You were wrongfully arrested, and I'm really sorry this happened. But unfortunately, you're now in the hands of immigration. I wish you luck." That's all he said. He wished me luck.
I remember election night, 2016. My son, Bryant, was then 7, and he was crying and crying because he thought now everyone's parents were going to be deported. He was inconsolable because during the whole election cycle, there was so much racist rhetoric against immigrants, and our kids really absorbed the way politicians were talking about immigrants. For any kid who has immigrant parents, even if that kid is themselves a citizen, they felt like their country was rejecting them.
All I kept thinking as I crossed Guatemala and Mexico was that if I could just make it to the United States, I would finally be safe. I would find help. But when I got caught crossing the border, I realized this is not the country that El Salvadorians think it is. Because when immigration catches you, they treat you like a dangerous criminal, like a wild animal. They put handcuffs on you and then chain them to your waist or your feet. I tried to run, and the agent tackled me to the ground with a ton of force. They don't treat you with any kind of respect or care. And so in that moment, I discovered this was not the country I thought it was. They took me to what migrants call the freezer. It was so cold. During the 3 days I was there, I didn't have a blanket. They would occasionally bring us sandwiches, but they were frozen sandwiches that cracked and that you couldn't eat. They put me and about 12 other people in a room, and the bathroom was in the room with us. You had to use the bathroom where everyone else could see you. There weren't any mattresses or places to lay down. They were just concrete benches, and that's where we slept. This was in McAllen, Texas. And then, every couple of hours, Immigration agents would come and take you out of the freezer to interrogate you. They moved us several times to different jails or detention centers to do the same thing. They would just put us on a bus. We didn't know where we were going, and then they would move us again. Eventually, I arrived at a detention center closer to Houston that was more residential, and they treated us with more respect. That's where they told me I would be released pending my asylum case. My brothers were in New York living with a group of other men, but because of all my bad experiences and not wanting to live with men I didn't know, I decided I would come to Colorado where my female cousins lived. It was still so hard that first year, but when I met my husband, everything changed. We met through family and friends at a dinner party. It was difficult at first because of all the things that I had been through. I was afraid to be in a relationship, to be close to someone again. But I took the risk, and I feel that's the best risk I've ever taken in my life. I never thought I would get married or that I would have 3 children. And I never thought that I would meet someone so understanding, so patient, someone who would fight next to me every day and always be there for me. So I feel very grateful that God put him in my path right when I needed him most.
Gracias a la vida. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio 2 luceros que cuando los abro, perfecto distingo lo negro del blanco y en el alto cielo su fondo estrellado y en las multitudes el hombre que yo amo. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la marcha de mis pies cansados. Con ellos anduve ciudades y charcos, playas y desiertos, montañas y llanos, y a la casa tuya, tu calle y tu patio. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la risa y me ha dado el llanto. Así yo distingo dicha de quebranto, los 2 materiales que forman mi canto y el canto de ustedes que es mi mismo canto y el canto de todos que es mi propio canto. Gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida.
My husband, Eliseo, was born in Mexico and came to the United States as a teenager without documentation. His father is a United States citizen, and his mother is a permanent resident. He has had no arrest order, but ICE found out about him while investigating me here in Sanctuary, and they went after him. It's cruel. He was just going to the store to get groceries. They had no warrant. They just followed him into Safeway. How am I going to tell my children that their father is not coming? It is wrong to take away a good father.
My mother was able to apply for me to be a U.S. resident over 19 years ago. And then in 2006, the application was approved. But people don't understand that doesn't give me any legal status. It just gives me the opportunity to apply for permanent residency when my number comes up. But the system is so backlogged that it's going to take another 15 to 20 years until my turn comes. And if my mother dies, my application cancels automatically.
After I was released from jail for domestic violence, I had to hire a lawyer to deal with immigration. Unfortunately, I hired a very bad lawyer, and despite the false charges, he lost my case. Within just 2 days to appeal, I had no time to find a better lawyer. But of course, as a result of this lawyer's negligence, the appeal was denied, and I ended up with orders of deportation. When I found out, I hired a new lawyer to better represent me, and she has been able to keep me in the country with a stay of removal filed each year. So every year, I must report to ICE. They take my fingerprints and verify I haven't done anything bad.
After about 6 months in the United States, my siblings were able to come up with some money for me to get a lawyer who would take my case through asylum proceedings. But I was never prepared for court. So when the judge asked me what had happened to me in El Salvador, my emotions took over. All I wanted was for them to stop asking me those questions so I could get out of there. For me, talking about it is reliving it. I just wanted to stop. And well, the asylum was denied. So the lawyer asked for a stay of deportation. Every time they filed the stay, it was $7,000, and it lasted only a year. I remember the third time. We had just sold our car a few days earlier. We had other plans for what we were going to do with that money for our family when the lawyer said, "We need the money again for another stay." So we gave them the $7,000, but that $7,000 lasted them just 2 weeks. 2 weeks of legal work. At the end of 2 weeks, they called us and said, "We need more money because your account is at zero." We just felt so much frustration and impotence. Like, what happened to all that money? What did they do with all that money? The lawyer told me at my next check-in in 2017 that I had to leave. I told him, "I can't go back to my country. I can't go back." He said, "I'm sorry. There's nothing more I can do for you." I got so angry. "This is your fault," I said. "You think just because I don't speak English that I don't know what was happening?" I was there in court when they were asking the lawyer about my case, and everyone knew the lawyer didn't know the answers. And he said, "Well, if you don't think that we did a good job, then I don't want to take your case." And he literally threw the papers with my case at me. Despair shook my body, and I just started laughing and said, "What case? What case are you going to take? You lost my case. There is no case."
I could have gotten a lesser sentence for using a false social security number. I could have pled not guilty because I didn't know it was someone else's number. But when they took me to jail, Bryant was just 2 years old, and without me, he was not eating. My aunt brought Brian to see me in jail, trying to help him, but they would not let me hold him. He could just look at me from behind the glass, and he kept screaming and crying for me. He didn't understand that I couldn't remove the glass and hold him. My aunt said that it took him 2 days to calm down. He just kept crying and crying, and they did not have the compassion to let me touch my baby. The lawyer told me that if I pled guilty, I would get out with probation, pay the IRS, and I would be with my son again. He assured me it would not cause problems with the immigration, but if I tried to fight my case, I might end up back in jail. So I pled guilty and returned to my family. But the lawyer did not understand immigration law, and pleading guilty has ruined my life.
I have not been able to get out of the false charge against me, although I fought deportation for 8 years. And now I have become a leader. This immigration system that is so unjust is what forces us to become leaders. You aren't born a leader, you become a leader. Myself, along with other mothers who had been detained by the Show Me Your Papers law, got together and went to the Capitol to tell our stories. We told them the truth of what the police were doing. All of us were in the deportation system because of something insignificant, like not doing a complete stop, or having a broken taillight, or being wrongly accused. And one of the senators, after listening, used my story on the Senate floor to explain the dangers of this law. Because of our advocacy, it was repealed, and now everyone is safer from this type of racial profiling.
The night is my muse because that's when I'm all by myself in the church, and I go outside in the quiet and sit. Sometimes I write a poem, other times I just pray or reflect. This is when my old life returns to me and I think of my pets. When I would come home from work and my dogs would jump all over me, and I would hug them and kiss them. Those moments from my sweet life. On one of these nights, the church was surrounded in floodlights. I pulled the blinds and there were 5 different patrols there. The state, sheriff, police. They had their lights all facing the church. I thought, oh my God, they're going to take me to some detention center in the middle of the night while no one is looking. The attendant from the congregation who stays with me went out and took his phone, and because they're always instructed to record the incident for the ACLU if something happens, he proceeded to do so. He started to go outside, already beginning to record their attempt to take me away. When the police officer yells, "Go back inside, there's an angry bear." It was a bear they were after. They had been chasing it through town and out of every single street. The bear had come here, in this church. You see that old brown bear and I? We're so dangerous. We're such a harm that we need all of these policemen to come after us. The bear and I are now buddies because we're so bad. We are a gang. You now say in Mancos that there truly is sanctuary for all at the Methodist Church because the bear came here.
Undocumented people come to this country for a better future. If there was a path to legalization, we would not be in this situation. And I would like for Congress to act because we are not talking about 10 undocumented people. We are 11 million living, working, and paying taxes. Our children are citizens of this country. They go to school with your children, play soccer with children, or go to church with your children. They should not lose their parents, but be supported to do best for their country. So I can't tell you how my heart hurts whenever I hear of immigration raids at American companies, because that means they are separating many families. Children are just left waiting at the school parking lot for parents who never arrive. It is so unfair they lose their parents just because they don't have documents. Or those children who arrive at the border that are being put into cages. Those of you who think separating children can be justified, imagine your child in a cage. And now we are seeing cases of children who are dying or being sexually abused in these detention centers. They are suffering a lot. It is inhumane what this system is doing. And it is just going to create problems because then these children have psychological damage from the separation. That's how people grow up violent, because of this system that is destroying lives.
I always say the government doesn't want immigration reform because immigrants, we're a huge business for them and for all the private detention facilities. People say there are no more slaves in this world, but that's not true. People need to understand the truth about systems of economic exploitation and what they're doing with us. That's why I'm not going with ICE and participating in this unjust system. I may not have a legal paper, but I don't need a legal paper to stay with my kids. I'm a mother. I don't need that.
It has been my dream to own a well-established food business. I wanted to be the best, not a big chef on TV, but simply to make good food. That's what I love. My favorite moment is when you take the first bite, taste my food, and tell me what it's like. That's my happiest moment. I love that. Living in this country, I have noticed that there's a lot of terrible food. I was so upset by this. These people need to know how to eat. That was my thing. You haven't eaten real Mexican burritos. You have to taste mine, so you know. You have to taste my tamales, so you know. But even though back in 2000, I bought a food truck, my situation was never really stable. My parents and I were trying to get my citizenship. I was always needing to pay immigration lawyers money, and all of the expenses really prevented me from starting my business. I had to keep working 2 other jobs while trying to sell my tamales. I paid $30,000 for the food truck. It is parked by my house. It was all part of my dream. But if you see that truck and you see my old house, and you see how things look right now, those things, it's like how things have turned out. It's getting old with the dream inside it. And now it is happening to me. I'm getting old with the dream inside.
I know I have a legal case because if I don't get asylum, I will be kidnapped or killed. It would be as though this government is taking my life away and leaving my kids as orphans. My only relief has been thinking that somehow I will find a way to leave the kids with their father. I don't know how this would happen because Jorge can't stay at home with 3 small boys. He has to work. But then they would be alive and I wouldn't lose them to a gang. And even though there is no life for me without them, it would comfort me to imagine them safe with Jorge. But even that comfort is being denied to me, for soon immigration will come after him too. Jorge has had temporary protected status from President Bush for over 22 years, but the Trump administration is taking that status away. Soon both of us will be targeted.
I always tell people that God doesn't work like a genie in a bottle. To really understand how God works, it takes a lifetime. It takes trials and tests, and we just keep wondering and asking, why me, Lord? I have been in sanctuary over a year. My mother, Blanca Valdivia, died on July 23rd, 2018 in Mexico without me. And I am paying a very high price of sorrow and grief, and nothing will take that away from me.
Adiós, mariquita linda. Ya me voy porque tú ya no me quieres como yo te quiero a ti. Adiós, chaparrita chula. Me voy para tierras muy lejanas y ya nunca volveré. Adiós, vida de mi vida. La causa de mis dolores. dejaré. Adiós, vida de mi vida, la causa de mis dolores, el amor de mis amores, el perfume de mis flores, para siempre dejaré.
I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm in sanctuary saying, here I am, an honest, hardworking immigrant fighting for my family and all the families facing separation. They think that there are laws only for poor people like me, but I lift up my voice because we have never lost that dignity of defending our human rights, because we love our children and we love being free. What is that beautiful story behind the Statue of Liberty worth? The whole sanctuary movement. We are appealing to that history. Let us come together and insist on the humanitarian application of immigration laws. It is difficult enough to maintain strong families. Why would our government separate us when we are working to provide a good home and life for our children? I don't understand it. Human dignity is not based on one legal paper. We aren't creatures from a different world. I am simply a woman, and like any other mother whose children are threatened, I have lost the fear of speaking out. Do you understand? I'm a human being. I have feelings just like you. I love my children just like you. Just like you.
A dream I always had as a young girl was to get married in a church, to be all in white, and for my father to give me away. All of my siblings have partners, but they didn't have the money to get married formally in a church. I thought, as the last child, I could make this happen and my father would feel very proud. I was raised Catholic, but over these past 10 months in sanctuary, I have decided that someday Jorge and I will get married in this church. This church and Temple Micah hosts 25 women who are homeless every other month. My children and I help prepare their beds and meals. I see the women who run this program. They do it from a place of such grand love. It doesn't matter to them if the woman who walks through the door is dirty or clean, if she's making sense or not. They treat all of the women in the homeless program like they are queens. I want to belong to something like that, where I am part of something that gives back and recognizes people for who they are. Someday, Jorge and I will be married in this church, and I will wear all white. But my father won't be here to give me away.
It is easy to blame a person, but the whole system is the problem. We are decent people, normal people. We are your neighbors, your family, your employees, and sometimes even your employers, who are simply here to live, be productive, and have something to offer the community. I'd like to invite you to get to know each of us in sanctuary, through our stories, and commit to take action. We, the people, have the power to make things change. We, the people, are a force that can transform the improbable to the possible.
I was asked in an interview what it would be like to have migrant justice. It's almost hard to imagine. It seems so far away. But I think that a lot of it would be feeling free to move around without always looking over your shoulder. To have that freedom, to go to the store and to the park with your children.
The happiness of walking my boys to school every day, knowing they can always hold my hand.
To be able to help my son Alex pay for his studies at the university, and that Edwin is no longer anxious and can sleep again through the night.
To finally have the freedom to plan my life and to decide my own future.
And to simply not be afraid.
Dorme, dorme, hermosa doncella. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Dorme, dorme, hermoso Egipto. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin dolor.
And now we can take a few shared breaths together as we feel the impact of Teresita's beautiful voice and these stories of women in sanctuary. Before Rabbi Mark Soloway offers us a reflection and leads us in a conversation, I would like to ask the four readers to speak briefly. What was the impact of reading these stories today?
I think that's a great question. And before we read live, I think I was thinking of what to answer, but reading it live with all these other really wonderful women, as well as reading these stories, you really feel the intensity of these stories. And it was an honor to read them. Obviously coming from a place of privilege, to be able to share these stories so others hear them, I think that's really important. So I think overall for me, it just felt very humbling.
And it feels very personal because as the Sandra, who I read, said, I am just like you. And these women really are just like us, working hard, trying to make the best lives for themselves and their children, and not deserving of the double standard and double punishment that happens in our immigration system.
I remember when, after 2016, things started to change, and I was working in Brooklyn, and a lot of my coworkers, staff, CNAs, home health aides, were in danger. They were in tremendous danger. I remember thinking, we should all dress in uniforms. Everyone in New York City should just wear the uniforms of healthcare workers so that we would all confuse everyone about who would disappear and who wouldn't. I was thinking about the word disappearance and what that means, what that really means. And I want to share a reading if it's okay. I'm not going to say from whom, but it really impacts me to feel that a person could disappear from their life, from their children. What does it mean to be one of those who disappeared? Who knew about it? Who did anything to help? Who chose the one to disappear? Was there any reason for the disappearance? Did the disappearance follow a pattern? What was it like to live in a highly cosmopolitan, sophisticated city and to hear in school or at the university or at a workplace that a boy or a girl or a man or a woman who was sitting next to you one day disappeared overnight? What is it like to walk into your loved one's bedroom and find him or her not there? Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. What is it like to be in mourning without a body to bury? What would it be like not to have the slightest notion of what happened to one's son or daughter or brother or sister or friend or parent? What does it mean to disappear?
Thank you for that. And to all, hearing a story like Rosalie's, a life that is filled with so many challenges, and a life that doesn't have any of the safety nets that I am used to, really shook me up in a good way. The level of privilege that I am used to brings both a sense of relief and guilt at the same time. To face how hard it is for another mother, a woman with her own hopes and dreams that have been dashed, is sobering. Learning about the pain that she suffered was very moving to me. And also understanding that she has the power to penetrate that suffering with love. And she's able to infuse everything with love. And she has developed resilience because of that love. And I hear these women, all of these women who emphasize life, even our beautiful song, which talks about life, and how little things is all, it can bring so much. And my own complicated thoughts of what happiness would be calm down in that sobering moment so that I can better embrace what I have. I hold Rosalie, all these women close. She's now my teacher. She's my teacher. She inspires me towards gratitude. How one could be fierce yet soft, appreciative, and truly present in hardship. I cherish these stories.
Thank you all. We have the pleasure now of hearing from Rabbi Soloway. How does your understanding of Jewish teachings and text inform how you hold these stories?
Thank you. It's so, there's so many of the images of some of those words. And I always, when you listen, it's always, I always want to take notice of the words that stick with me. And for some reason, the Rosa that Rosalie read, Rosa and Rosalie have become connected now. Just that line where she says, "And now I'm growing old and my dreams are inside." I don't know why, but that really impacted me. Just the thought of these women who had, like we all have, so many dreams of a future, and so many of the stories talked about the dream of just a future that's not complex, just the things that we all want and yearn for. And when some of the stories talk about human rights and human dignity and those basic values to bring up a family, to educate and feed and clothe your family, There are some rabbinic sources that talk about what is described in Hebrew as kavod habriot, which is most accurately translated as human dignity, as being so important that actually other obligations can be put aside in order to maintain and preserve human dignity. And it is so deeply shocking. I mean, it's not shocking because we know it. We've known it for a long time, just how many people in this world do not have basic human dignity and live in fear. And I feel unbelievable anger and shame that the main architect of this administration's immigration policy comes from a practicing Jewish family, Stephen Miller, whose own family have disowned him because they say that what he is doing is so antithetical to the tradition in which he was brought up. And yet he has architected this cruelty, this degradation, this deprivation of human dignity. And I think as a Jew, as a rabbi, I'm ashamed, deeply ashamed of that, as are his own family. And they've spoken publicly about their shame. That a Jewish person whose own family were refugees can be the architect of such cruelty where families are separated. It's unthinkable. You know, I was along with Alan Rosenfeld, a lawyer, and Dr. Naomi Feynman, a pediatric doctor, and myself, we founded the Moral Minyan, where we were going once a month up to the ICE detention center in Aurora and praying and singing and trying to connect through prayer and song and action with people. And we did that because we felt compelled to do it. We felt like our tradition compelled us to do it. We felt like our basic morality as Jewish people compelled us to stand up in that way. And the appalling things we learned about what goes on inside those ICE detention facilities, and some of the stories that we've heard about women sharing one room and a toilet in the middle of it. And it's just the most disgusting, degrading of humanity. And of course, just the fact that so many people live in fear of what's going to be happening, and the fact that we as a civilization have just continued to enable that fear. I find that the word sanctuary, you know, it would be best translated in Hebrew as Mishkan. And a Mishkan was the portable sanctuary that was in the desert when the Israelites were wandering through the desert, when they themselves left the slavery and they themselves were refugees escaping a tyranny. And in that, how did they spiritually adjust and transition out of the tyranny into the hope of and the dreams of a promised land, through Mishkan, through sanctuary, through having a space where the community could hold each other and where they could feel God's presence among them. And I find that such a powerful notion, this word sanctuary, and the fact that faith communities across the country are providing sanctuary for people who are living in that kind of fear. Next, very soon, it's going to be Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we read an incredibly painful story of a woman who is banished. And her name is Hagar. And Hagar really means the ger, the stranger, the outsider, the foreigner. And that word ger, which some rabbinic traditions translate as the proselyte, the one who is among you who has converted to Judaism, is not what the word means. The word means a stranger, an outsider, a refugee, someone who is displaced, someone who doesn't have a permanent home, someone who lives in fear and insecurity about what their lives might be. And the Torah tells us, and some of you know this, 36 times the Torah, our most sacred book, tells us about our obligations to the ger, to the stranger, to love the stranger, to protect the stranger, not to oppress the stranger. And it says, Vidatem et nefesh hager, because you know the soul, you know the heart, you know what it is to be an outsider. And because of that knowing, you in turn cannot be responsible for oppressing another stranger. And so that the obligation, I think, in Jewish tradition to work for justice, to work for the people on the margins of society, to work for all the people who live in fear and insecurity at the tyranny and the injustice that exists within this country and throughout the world, comes from that basic idea. The basic idea that every human being is created, but B'Tselem Elohim, which is in the image of the divine. Every single human being, whoever they are, wherever they come from, whatever they believe, whoever they love, has the basic core of divinity within them, and that we are obligated to respect and to love and to nurture that divinity and to give people the dignity to live their lives and to fulfill their dreams and not grow old with their dreams inside of them. So I am very, 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 very aware of my own privilege and my own complicity in participating in systems that keep people suppressed. I've been thinking more about that in terms of the systemic racism against our African American community, but when it comes to these very cruel ways in which we have an immigration policy that just does not see the humanity, it just sees the status, it just sees the legal status. And as Rosalie said at the beginning, just the words that we use, which are dehumanizing in themselves, the words that describe people, that take away their humanity. And I just feel so strongly that we are called to see the humanity in everybody, and especially those who are on the margins. You know, the idea that the categories of people who are often described as being on the margins are the ger, the almanah, and the yatom, which is the stranger or the refugee, the widow and the orphan, people who have lost agency in a society that has its own rules, and so they become outside. And so the Jewish community, or the Jewish tradition rather, commits us to take care of those people who are marginalized and disenfranchised and disempowered and have lost their own agency. And we are obligated to do that so that they will in fact have their own agency and have their own dignity and be able to live their own dreams. So I think I'll leave it there, but I want to just really honor the four women whose stories we heard tonight, and the four wonderful women who read those stories, and Motus Theatre for bringing this in such a powerful and provocative and important way to life for us all. So thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now is a great moment for us to listen to any questions. If you do have some questions, please type them into the chat, or you can use the nifty Q&A feature button. And while you're thinking of those questions, I'm actually going to put a link in the chat that takes you to a document that has some facts about immigrants in the United States. And more importantly, it lists some action items, right? We're always wondering, what are the things we can do? And so it lists some action items that people can take. But I'll pause for a moment while you sort of type in your questions into the chat. It could be towards Rabbi Mark, towards any of the four readers, or even towards myself. And as soon as we start getting some questions in there, I'll start seeing who can take them. And if you're listening to us on Facebook, you can actually ask a question on the Facebook comment, and that will also be plugged in to me over here on Zoom. Someone asked the question, where are these women now and how can we support them? I think the first half of the question is harder for me to answer just because some of them have very unique situations and their lawyers have sort of advised them to not share any more details. So I'll just sort of leave it open-ended. But how you can support them, there's definitely links in the document I put in the chat where you could donate financially. But also, I think there's a lot of work that Motus Theater does to uplift their stories and the stories of others by, simply sharing stories is actually a very powerful moment for people to engage better in the conversation. Even as we saw tonight, it's really incredible what we can do with story sharing. Does anyone else on the readers or Rabbi have a suggestion as to how can we support them?
I think you answered it very beautifully. I think some people financially, monetarily is a good way to support if you can, but being able to share stories like this is another really great way to raise awareness, I think. And Charna, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I mean, it's little things like prayer, like picturing any of these people and holding them in your heart and shining light. By looking at people on the street that you might hold askance with your old views and actually leaning into curiosity and heart, not making, and I'd say what we can really do for them is to hold our government officials accountable for the policies that they create. We have such a power with our vote. What some of these lawyers in these stories got away with on this money train is infuriating. And lawyers can be very, very good, right? But to call for that kind of accountability through your vote, know your representatives that you're voting for, how they feel about these things. And I can't think of holding that more accountable, because it's only through policy that we're going to start to see changes. Policy, prayer, heart.
I also would add that the most important thing that all of us can do is remember the humanity and dignity in every single person, not just these women, but all of us. I've had a lot of time to philosophize, as I was saying earlier, during COVID and being home a lot. And I feel like the most important thing we can do, I've come to the conclusion, is to judge less, judge ourselves less, and judge other people less. And just remember, we are all struggling human beings. And if we remember that, we will make choices and have actions based on that, that will be better for everybody.
Also, you would be surprised if through the course of our days, walking around, working, wherever we might go, we can interact with people that are at risk, that are struggling, and think of the ways that we care for them and treat them in our interaction, whether it's the people walking into our homes to take care of some of our aspects of our home, our gardens, the supermarket, wherever we find ourselves. Interact, humanize, hold, talk. How are you doing? You need help with anything? Whatever it is, right in front of us. It's not so hard.
Thank you all. Those are beautiful suggestions of things that we can do. The fact sheet, the document link is in the chat, I think a couple times, so feel free to check it out for different action items you can take. It was mentioned also in the chat that there are definitely other organizations to get involved with, and through immigrant rights groups figuring out how to then, sort of connect with the immigrant community. And then of course, also getting out the vote. This is a very important year. On behalf of Motus Theater, we want to again thank the courageous women in Sanctuary whose stories we heard today, and of course the readers from B'nai Shalom who stood in their shoes. Motus's powerful contributing artists, including Motus Theater's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson, photojournalist Joel Dyer, and singer Teresita Lozano. After you get off the Zoom presentation, you will actually get a survey, and I do hope you will fill it out. We ask that you support Motus Theater so we can continue this work. The women in Sanctuary and all artists are paid for our work. So today we will be splitting any donations between Motus and the women whose stories you heard. There's also the link, of course, with actions and information on immigration and COVID-19. And I just want to, someone asked in the chat what my status is. I am undocumented. I'm a DACA recipient. I was born in Mexico, raised in Phoenix, and currently in Colorado. But I've been in this country since 1998. At this moment, this concludes our performance today. On behalf of Motus Theater, we want to again thank the courageous women in Sanctuary and the artists, the readers, and all of you listening, joining us tonight. Please take good care of yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you at our next performance. Thank you for your support and sharing.
Thank you.
Dorme, dorme, hermosa doncella, dorme, dorme, sin ansia, sin